The Philippines is one of the most incredible countries we've ever been to, with incredible landscapes, breathtaking beaches, and some of the most hospitable people we've ever come across. Last year, we had the privilege of spending 1 month traveling across this beautiful island nation, and we got to experience one of the most incredible things that we've ever done, a multi-day boat tour across the Linapacan Islands, between El Nido in Palawan and Coron. And with picture-perfect beaches, untouched corals, and even falling asleep to the sound of the waves, this is one of the most incredible things that we've ever done. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what to expect from a boat tour like this, and I'm going to break down everything from food to cost to sleeping arrangements, everything you need to know to do a boat tour like this yourself. And I'm going to show you exactly why this was one of the most amazing things we did on our year-long trip last year and why you need to do it yourself. I'm also going to be completely transparent and even cover some of the negative aspects as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, let's start with the basics. We did this 4-day, 3-night boat tour as part of an organized tour with a company called Kiluma. Our tour started in the town of El Nido and ended in Coron, but there is also the option of doing it the other way around and starting in Coron and ending in El Nido. As this is a one-way tour, we brought all of our belongings with us and put our big suitcases underneath the boat and didn't touch them for 4 days. And instead we brought a small dry bag with our valuables and our day-to-day things with us on the boat. We paid 19,800 pesos each for this trip, which is around $350. This price included everything from food for 4 days to accommodation for 3 nights and even the transport to the port from El Nido on a minibus. We didn't receive any of this for free, and all of these opinions are our own. We only chose to go with Kiluma because they were a fairly new company with very good reviews online and a very reasonable price. The only things that weren't included in this price were any drinks that weren't water, so soda or beer or liquor, and also it didn't include tips for the crew. We booked this trip around 1 month before we left, and including us, there was only 13 people on our boat, so it was a pretty relaxed and chilled experience. Our experience took place around the end of December and beginning of January, so we spent the new year on a remote island in the Linapacan Islands, which was fantastic. There are also a number of other companies off this tour, but from the research that we did before we chose Kiluma, we realized that they were actually charging around 2 or 3 times the price, but also filling their boat with like 3 times as many people. And from what we'd heard from people we met in El Nido before we did our boat tour, we also heard that they were more like a booze cruise or a party boat, and we just weren't really interested in that. From what we'd heard from other people, it just seemed like these other boats, their main goal was just to get people as drunk as possible and spend as much money on overpriced beer as they could. So that's why we chose the company that we did. The main highlight of doing a tour like this is just the opportunity to see isolated islands that you might not otherwise see. And the scenery on these islands is absolutely incredible. It's picture perfect, tropical islands, white sandbar, crystal clear water, everything you imagine when you think of the Philippines. What we saw on these 4 days on the boat surpassed most of what we'd already seen in the Philippines. And we spent 2 months in the Philippines, so we visited over 10 islands already. But this was probably the most consistently beautiful scenery that we had seen in our entire trip. And because of the lack of development and infrastructure on the Linapacan Islands, it kind of feels like an untouched gem with like palm trees everywhere, white sand, untouched corals. It really did feel like a bit of a hidden gem. During the day, the main objective was to stop at between 2 and 3 of these remote islands. And these islands were a mixture of sandbars, coral reefs, and white sand beaches. Most of the time, we simply docked the boat around 100 meters from the shore of these islands, and we either swam to them or we just snorkeled around the boat. But sometimes we did also dock directly onto the island so we could walk along the beaches. The main activity that we did during the day was snorkeling, and snorkels and masks were provided, but some of them were kind of old and leaking, so it was kind of hit and miss whether or not you got a good one or not. The coral reefs that we stopped at were incredible though, with so many fish and other sea creatures swimming around. So if you like snorkeling, you should definitely add this to your bucket list. Between the stops at the islands though, we did spend a lot of time on the boat. So I would recommend, if you don't get motion sickness while moving and reading, you should definitely bring a book, because sometimes we would spend up to a few hours just sitting on the boat between the stops. However, the scenery whilst riding the boat is incredible, and you get to go past some of these incredible remote islands and see them from a different perspective in the water. In the evenings, when we spent time on the islands that we slept on, we mostly just watched the sunset and played cards with the other guests, and these sunsets were genuinely some of the most incredible sunsets we've ever seen, and we've seen a lot of sunsets. We also sang karaoke one night, which was really funny, as most of the crew and most of us, after a few beers, ended up getting up and singing, which was just really funny. Okay, so the sleeping arrangements. Every night we docked onto a different local island and slept in small, basic beach huts, either on the beach or very close to the beach. These huts were little triangle-shaped bamboo huts with just a foam mattress and a bug net. And despite sounding very basic, they were actually really, really comfortable to sleep in and really cool with the wind and the breeze blowing through them. Falling asleep to the sound of the waves crashing every night was such an amazing experience. The facilities on these islands were very basic with no running water and very little electricity. To shower, there would just be a small concrete cubicle with a giant drum of well water, and we would just use a bucket to wash the salt off of us every single night. The toilets were also bucket flush, but they were all Western style. Like I said, these islands are very remote and very basic, so it's not like a luxury resort style accommodation, but that kind of adds to the charm of the experience. There was also usually somewhere to charge our phone in the evenings, but we also brought a power bank with us so we didn't have to rely on it just in case. The boat that we spent all of our time on was a traditional Filipino boat called a banca, and this is basically a wooden boat with two arms or outriggers around a dugout canoe style middle. The boat that we were on was definitely a lot smaller than some of the other tour groups that we saw go by, but as there was only 13 people on our boat, it was the perfect size and it was super comfortable for the amount of people that were on it. This also meant we could dock at some places that the larger boats couldn't, which kind of made it feel like a bit more of an off-the-beaten-path experience. These boats are generally very exposed, so you will get splashed by waves if you sit near the front of the boat. Also, if you're really unlucky like we were and it rains on your trip, then you're probably going to get a little bit wet. The boat does move really slowly, and because of the way that our boat was set up, there was like two wooden benches along the sides of the boat where we had to sit. And because we would spend a couple hours or more each day on the boat, sitting and waiting to get to the next destination, it was a little bit uncomfortable at times. Also, if there are big waves on some of the exposed sections on the trip, then the boat does move around a lot. So if you do get motion sickness, I would definitely recommend bringing some medication just in case. And to get to the islands that you'll spend the night on, there is actually a small banca on the boat, and that will take you and your small little dry bag with day-to-day belongings in it. That will take you to the islands. And this boat is really, really small and only takes like 3 or 4 people at a time. So it kind of like relays between the boat and the island. And we actually got really, really wet pretty much every night when we went on this boat because of the waves. So definitely buy a dry bag in El Nido and bring that with you just in case. The food on this trip was delicious, and every meal, breakfast, lunch and dinner, was included with the price of our tour. Water was also included for free, but if we wanted anything else to drink like soda or beer, this was tallied up and charged to us at the end of the trip when we got off the boat. All of the meals were served family style, so there was loads of options and there was plenty for everyone. And before eating, the chef would always come out and explain what everything was so that we were never unsure. There was always loads of vegetarian options and lots of vegetables available for the people that didn't eat meat or fish, but mostly we were served some kind of seafood for lunch and dinner. There was also always rice available and fruit and lots of vegetables, so everything felt very nutritious. We actually got to try a lot of different foods that we hadn't tried before in the Philippines, so we actually really enjoyed the food. And lunch was always eaten on the boat, and then dinner and breakfast were served at some kind of table on one of the islands that we were staying on. We never once felt like we were hungry after eating. There was always so much food and there was always food left over. And we were really impressed with the food considering it was made on a tiny little kitchen on a boat. Even when it was super wavy, it was very impressive. Something that you should definitely consider when doing a tour like this is the time of year and the weather. And the dry season in El Nido and Coron is between December and May. Rainy season is between May and October, with most of the rain being in September and October. Like I said earlier, we actually did this tour at the beginning of January, so we were right in the middle of dry season. However, we also got some really bad weather just before we went on the tour, and a bunch of boat tours were cancelled just before we left, so we actually ended up getting some rain and a lot of big waves, despite going in dry season. So even though going in dry season is a great idea, sometimes the weather just kind of does what it wants. Luckily though, after our first day, we had lovely clear skies and we didn't get any more rain. And like I said, the waves were pretty choppy when we went, but from everything else we'd seen online before we went, it's usually pretty calm. I think in some of the exposed sections there are some waves, but we just got really unlucky. So we decided to go with Key Lima because we didn't like the idea of going on a giant party boat with 35 other people. So the general vibe on our boat was really, really chilled and everyone was super friendly and super relaxed, and it was a great experience. We got on really well with everyone that was on the boat with us, but I can imagine that if there's someone that you don't get on with, it would be quite uncomfortable because you are in close proximity to them. Obviously the boat is quite small, so you're with them all the time. There was also a real mix of people on our tour. There was a couple of couples, there was some siblings, there was some solo travelers, and there was even a larger group. And the crew on the boat were absolutely amazing as well. They were all so helpful and so lovely, and they all did an amazing job at making us feel super welcome and comfortable. Like I said, though, we did not get paid or get this trip for free in any way, so these opinions are completely unbiased and our own. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up. I hope I have convinced you to take a tour through the Linapacan Islands, because this was genuinely one of the best experiences that we had in our whole year of travel last year. As usual, if you have enjoyed this video, please leave me a like before leaving. Also, do check out our channel for other travel related content.